Hello, this is Charles Shaw from Demand Discovery. This time we're going to cover the last point on the business perspective for the 10 ways to lose money in property investing. So we're going to do this point here. I will just rewind there we go. So 10 ways to lose money. What I mean by supply and demand is, so just to qualify the background a little bit, I studied economics. First category from Cambridge, and then went on to do a master there as well. So behavioral economics, very much kind of I want to understand why people behave the way they do. So if you apply the same kind of principles onto a property investment, I always find that, for example, so right now, or actually a few years back, you see a lot more HMOs, and then also you see a lot of buy-to-lets. So there's this kind of idea of that industry has a lot of potential. Why? Because now you have generation rent. And that is, these people, whether it's because of personal taste or affordability issues, they're no longer looking at buying their homes. They just rent probably for a long period of time, if not their entire lives. So what that means is, if you do go into buy-to-let, or if you go into HMOs, you have a lot bigger demand for these units. However, I would say, from an economics perspective, if I think about who is supplying these units, especially if you look at just a normal buy-to-let, pretty much anyone with some spare capital and a stable income, they can go into buy-to-lets. So to me, in that case, in economics we call this is very elastic supply, meaning that the supply, so how many of these out there can expand or contract very quickly, because it's a very low barrier to go into that kind of business. So to me, yes, so you may have a projected long-term increase in the demand. However, because supply, I think your competitors will also enter or expand very easily, then to me it's like, what's your competitive advantage here? It may not make sense. So yes, there's a bigger pie and the pie is growing. Assuming that's true, the problem is you can have a lot more people who is going to eat the pie, going to compete with you for the pie. So therefore, net is that still a good trade to go into? And this is where Buffett would say, I think a way to look at the business cycles, the economic cycle, is in Buffett's kind of brilliant terms is first you have the innovators. I think the people who pioneered HMOs, which gets a much higher gross yield from the same property, and then you have the imitators. I think once it's starting to propagate through industry, so some other professionals start to do this, and then you have the idiots who try to replicate this at the end. Turn it to mass market. By that point, it's going to be oversupplied, over competitive. Then actually you don't make them lose money, and the early innovators already moved on to the next big idea. So here, to me, it's worth to think about these new ideas. So it'd be useful if instead of just thinking about one side of it, if you think about both sides, both the supply and demand, because the two combined will arrive at a market kind of equilibrium, or market condition or pricing, for what you're considering to go into. And it's the same, taking another analogy in property, service accommodations, ISAs is a very hot topic of the day. And then the idea is, look at how many hotels out there who seems to be managing. Now, if you have Airbnb, Booking.com, so on and so forth, and if you manage decent, you can have remote managed properties as well. So if you combine these things together, you can actually run a large scale service accommodations, service apartments, if you wish. And then that is, these are substitutes for hotels. So a family of 3, 4, 5 maybe to stay in a flat service apartments for half the price compared to if they were spending the same time in the hotel. So on this, and again, so it's the same with HMOs, right? So on the demand side, it looks like it's very promising. You can compete, you can take business away from hotels, and then for us, it's like, okay, so that's the demand side. What about the supply side? Service accommodation, it turns out, unlike buy-to-let, so there are actually some barrier to entry in service accommodation, especially if you're doing this professionally as a business. So there's a lot of logistics. You can look at, roughly your operating costs would be close to, it could even be, if you're using platforms to book your customers, your operating costs could be somewhere between 30 to 50 to even 60% of your gross revenue. So there's a lot of business management involved. And then you need to manage your reviews and so on and so forth. So there's some barrier to entry, if for the professionals, especially if there's technically there's also leasehold controls restrictions on what can be used as service apartments. So this is kind of the supply side. So demand side, let's just assume there's going to be increasing demand and we're going to drive hotels out of business. Supply side, there's some barriers to act as professional hotel replacement. Slight difficulty is if let's say instead of running this professional as a business, a lot of people can just anybody with a spare room can do Airbnb. In that case, on the informal supply side, you probably say it's very elastic. So there's a lot of demand. If that part of the industry really takes off, then you may see a lot more part-time kind of home providers who just also sign up to supply these apartment service accommodation services. So on that is a slight, again, is trade-off between demand and supply, and it's always worth to consider both before you arrive at your judgment. Is this a worthwhile deal to get into it? And then so far we talk about demand and supply in terms of within the same market, are considering all factors at the same time. The other dimension you can think about this, or we will think about this, is an over time, right? So let's say there's a lot of UK housing reports saying that we have a massive housing shortage in the UK. Personally, I have other views on this topic, which we can discuss another day. But assume that's true. Then yes. So if you run a 10-year forecast, you have housing shortage. Does that mean today you should become a developer, and then you can just make your money no matter what you do, no matter where you are? To me, no, because what happens is there may be a shortage. There may be a shortage in the long term as well. However, today, let's say it's been 10 years since the last material market crash. So if anything, you probably say today there's abundance of supply of money, there's abundance of economic optimism, barring Brexit. So then therefore, although in the long term you may have a housing supply shortage, however, in the short term you may have a oversupply. And if you look at historical data on housing starts, when people build these things, it's strongly cyclical. So when the economy is doing really well, people overbuild, and then the economy crashes, then they can't sell, they go bust, and then next time it recovers, people go build again. So therefore, when you think about if you're sensitive to short-term market conditions, I also strongly suggest, when you read these reports and we think about it, yes, long-term it may go in a certain way. However, for you, it may make a difference that in the short term, if it goes the other way, you always want to think about supply and demand as well. So over time is also important. Okay, hope you find that useful. This is the last point number 5 on the business perspective. Next time we're going to finance. Thank you.